Hello and welcome to day 4 of the iMac modelling series. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to light and render the model that we've got now. So let's go ahead and get started. So there is just one or two things that I forgot to do in the previous videos. So if you've been following along and doing exactly what I've been doing, there was two things that I forgot to do, but we can do them really quickly now, which was the USB signs and logos. We've got to put those on, and also I forgot to add the power on button, but we can do that really quick now. So I'm going to start with doing the logos for the USB slots. So I'm going to come up to create new material, and then if we double click and open this, and we come to color texture, and we're going to go load image, and then if you navigate to the iMac resource pack, which is available in the description in day 1, and you add the USB logos and click open and then hit yes, and then come up to texture again and copy channel, and then we're going to uncheck specular and select alpha and check alpha, and then come up to texture, and then we want to paste channel, and we want to change the color to an almost black. And now what we can do is, if we come into our polygon mode and then select these pixels above the ports, and make sure we don't get any of the inside of the port, so you just want to select these, and then we want to come up to select set selection, and then we're going to call this USB logos, and then if we drag and drop this material onto the iMac body, and we come onto the tag itself and change the projection to flat, and then we copy the name of the set selection and then paste that into the selection of the itself, and then hit enter. Then what we can do is select the texture axis button, and we can start to move this texture around now so that we can see. And you can see that we're going to need to come into the texture tag and start to adjust the length U and length V, and we also want to uncheck tile. And then we just want to change the length U and length V accordingly. This is just trial and error, trying to do it by R. And you can start to see that the actual texture is white, and that's not what we want. We want the texture to be black. So if we double click and open up the material, and we just come into the texture tab and just clear this for now, and then we can close that, and you can see that the logos are now black. And then we want to come back into our texture and once again start playing with the length U and length V, and we're just trying to position these, and you can see that it's the opposite way around. So what we actually need to do is change the length U to something minus. So I've just skipped that part for now just to save time, but you can see now that I've got the texture all lined up nicely. So what we can do now is start to work on the on off button. So to do that, that's really simple. That's just a cylinder, And then if we come into the back perspective, and I've got my display on lines so we can see behind as well. And I'm just going to hide the iMac body for now. And then we're going to come onto the cylinder and change the orientation to something like +Z, and then we're going to reposition the center of the cylinder on the on-off switch, and then scale down the radius. Then if we come back into our 3D perspective and turn back on our iMac body, we can decrease the height to something really small. And we're just going to rotate this just so it lines up parallel to the iMac a bit more. And then what we're going to do, we're going to apply the same texture as the iMac body onto that. Okay, now we're ready to create the logo which will go on the switch. So we want to come over to create new material, and then we want to come on to basic and then check alpha and select alpha and then texture, load image, and then I'm going to load the power logo and then hit yes. Now this will be available via download link in the description below this video, so you can go and grab the logo for this, or you can just make your own one. It's really simple. And then we want to come on to color, and then we want the color to be a dark grey. And then we want to select alpha and then check invert. We may need to uncheck invert, we'll see which way it goes on. And then what we can do is select our cylinder and then hit C on the keyboard, and that's going to make it editable. And then we come into polygon mode, and then we select all these polygons here and make sure that we've come into the live selection mode, and then select all these polygons and then come up to select, set selection, and we're going to name this power logo, and then we can drag and drop our logo texture onto the cylinder, and then instead of UV mapping we want flat. Actually we want to undo that, we'll just leave it at UV mapping for now. And then what we want to do is uncheck tile, and then what I'm going to do to get this logo the right way, I'm going to change the length V to -100, and then I'm going to move the offset V to 100%, and there we go, we have our nice Apple power on logo. And what we can do, it's a bit too dark for me at the moment, so if I select this material and come on to colour, I'm just going to make it a more lighter grey, like so. And that's us pretty much done and ready to start lighting. So you're going to come up to File and Save Incremental. So now we're ready to create the lighting studio. So before I do that, I just want to tidy up a few things. So you can see we have the plug pins and the plug ports null objects. So you want to select those two and make them a child of the iMac body by just dragging and dropping them onto the iMac body. And then when we rotate, everything will rotate, including the plug pins. And then we want to make the cylinder also a child of the iMac body. Once again, so when we rotate the iMac body, it rotates as well. And then I'm just going to come up to Create, Object, Null. And then I'm just going to rename this iMac. and then we're going to drop the iMac body and iMac base into that null object. And if we come into the right perspective now, and then open this back up and come on the iMac body, and we select the axis button, which is this one here, and just reposition the axis, and then uncheck the axis button, and then hit R on the keyboard, and then now we can rotate the body and position it like so, just to match up with the picture. And now we are all good to go. So first off, if we come into our different viewports and select Shift V, and then we select back, I just want to delete the image that we've got. If we go on to configure all, actually no, we'll go on to Shift V on the front, and I'm just going to delete the image as well, and then Shift V on the right viewport, and I'm going to delete this image as well. And then if we select our right viewport and then come on to filter and then select grid, so now we can see the grid. Now we're ready to create the backdrop of the lighting studio. So if we come on to our splines tab and then select Bezier, I'm going to draw a line here, and then I'm going to add another one here, and then another one here, and at the same time, without letting go, just drag up to create a curve, and then I'm going to move up a little bit and add another point here, and then come back into our live selection mode, and then if we select the point mode, we can select these, make sure that they're all in line. So you can see this one needs moving over a little bit. Okay, then if we come back into our 3D perspective, and now we're going to need to extrude this spline. So come up to the extrude tab, extrude NURBS, and if you hold down Options or Alt on your keyboard and then select extrude NURBS while the spline object is selected, that's going to automatically place the spline object as a child of the extrude NURBS, and we don't want it on the Z value, we want to change it on the X value. So just increase the X value to maybe something pretty high, like 1000, 1500. And then we're just going to move it over to the center. And we're just going to increase this to 2000. And then just center it up. And now what I'm going to do is select the iMac, and I'm going to hit T on the keyboard, and we're going to scale this right down so it's quite small. And then if we select our back perspective and we just move this iMac just so it lines up on the floor, and we can zoom in a bit more. Just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this one on a 40-degree angle, something like that, and just position it there. And then I'm going to copy and paste the iMac and rotate it again. Just so you can see the front and the back of the iMac for the final render. And then we're going to add a camera, and then we're going to right click on the camera and select Cinema 4D tags, and then add a protection tag. And what's that going to do is stop us from moving the camera. So if we look through the camera now and try and move, we won't be able to do it. And now we're ready to start adding the lights. So I just want to make sure that the backdrop is in the very center. And there we are. So now if we select the lights tab and then select area light and then rotate it 90 degrees. And I think for this one we're going to come into the right perspective and we're going to want to scale this light up. So if we hit T on the keyboard, we're going to want to scale this light so it's pretty big and have that around somewhere there, and then move it over, and then we're going to copy and paste that light and rotate it 180 degrees. And then we're going to move this light over to the other side. And then we're going to come up to the light tab again and select area light. And then come into the details of this light and change the X, the size X and size Y. And then we're going to rotate this at a 40 degree angle and then just move it upwards. So now we're ready to create a new material, and then we want this material to be a very almost white. And then we're going to add this to the backdrop. It's a little bit too white just for the moment, so if we just bring that down just a touch. And then if we select all the lights by holding shift and selecting them all, or dragging a box around them and selecting them all, and select shadow and then change the shadow from none to area. And then come on to details and we want to make sure that show in reflection is checked. So now if we come on to the first light, I want to come on to general and then change the colour to an orange, to a nice orange light. And not too intense, just like that. And then the second light on the right hand side, I want to change this to a nice blue light, and once again not too intense. And then I want to select the overhead light and change this to sort of a greeny blue colour, but very light greeny blue colour. And then we want to change the intensity for this light down to something around 30. And then if we select the blue light on the right hand side, we're going to decrease this just a touch, and same again with the left hand light, just decrease this a touch as well. So with that done, you just want to come up to File, Save Incremental, once again just so we don't lose any of the hard work that we've just done. Now I'm going to get onto a bit of rendering. So first off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to do this in the standard render engine. So I'm using R13 in this, and this comes with the physical render engine. So just in case you haven't got that, I'm just going to go over how to do this normally, and then afterwards we're going to introduce the physical render engine and get some really nice depth of field going on. So we want to come onto the render settings and select effect, and we want ambient occlusion, and then effect again and global illumination. And then with those two selected, we want to come on to the anti-aliasing and change the geometry from geometry to best, and then we want to change the max level to something crazy like 8x8 or 16x16, and this is going to give us really nice anti-aliasing. And then all I'm going to do is just hit render, and I'm just going to pause it for now just while it does its thing, and I'll come back when it's rendered. It shouldn't take too long, but I'll be back in a moment. So you can see that it's just finishing up rendering now, and if we take a look, it's not looking too bad. You could do some, if you've got more time on your hands, you could probably do a bit more work with the shadows. The shadows look a little bit grey now, or you could come up to work on the ambient occlusion settings, and also maybe increase the diffuse depth to something to 2, and that's going to increase your render time, but it's up to you if you've got more time. So what I'm going to do is change the renderer from standard now to physical, and we're going to introduce the physical render engine and also take a look at some really nice depth of field. So if I come onto the camera now, and if we check out of the camera so we can spin around, I'm going to change the focal length to 50mm, and I'm going to leave the sensor size at 35mm. And what we're going to need to do is select the camera and change the focus distance. So we're going to decrease the focus distance. And then if we check it into our camera, you can see that we're going to need to move out a little bit. So to do that, I'm just going to move the protection tag just off the camera so we can move, and reposition it somewhere there, and then put the protection tag back onto the camera, and we check out of our camera, and we're going to need to increase the focus distance. And what I'm looking to do is have the focus point on the Apple logo in the center of the screen, so about there. And then if we check into our camera and then select physical, what I'm going to do is change the f-stop, the aperture, to something like 0.4 or 0.5. And then we want to change the vignetting intensity to 50%, and then what that's going to do, that's going to change the outside of the image, so it will get darker on the outside of the image. And the f-stop, also the aperture, if you was wondering, that also affects the depth of field. So the lower the aperture, the more light that's getting allowed in, so therefore that's a bigger or more shallow depth of field, so that gives you a more blurry depth of field. And with that done, you want to check diaphragm shape, and that's going to make the depth of field and the things out of focus, that's going to make them look really nice. And if we come on to the render settings, we're going to need to make sure that we've got checked depth of field, otherwise it won't work. And then if we just do a quick test render without any global illumination on, and we see how this is looking. So you can see that the depth of field is looking really nice. So if I come on and check global illumination and also ambient occlusion, and what I'm going to do now is change the sampler to fixed and change this to maybe 5, and we're going to change all these subdivisions to 5 as well. And for the render that I did on my Facebook, I think I set these to around 8 or 10, so it depends how fast your machine is and also how good of a render you want. So I'm just going to set these to 5 for now, and I'm just going to do a quick test render and see how it looks, and then come back and then we'll have a quick look and see how it has turned out. So I'm just going to hit render now, and I'll pause it and I'll be back when it's finished. Okay, we're back and it's finished rendering, and you can see that it looks pretty good. So I think that's pretty much it for the lighting and rendering. I think I've pretty much covered everything. There's just one thing, so if you come into the render settings, I would advise that render was a little bit blurry just on the depth of field. So what I'd do, I'd increase this to at least maybe 6 or 7, but if your machine can handle it and you've got the time, that render there took 7 minutes and 40 seconds, as you can see in the bottom left hand corner. So that's not actually too long. So if you wanted to bump this up to, I think the render that I did on my Facebook, like I said before, was 10. So if you bump that up to 10 and see how it goes, and if not, you can always lower it down. And the last thing that I'm going to do is just show you how to render it out to an actual picture. Oh, and there was one thing, if you're using the physical rendering, what I like to do is change the filter under anti-aliasing to Mitchell, and that gives you a really nice sharp anti-aliasing. So what I wanted to do just before I end this tutorial is show you how to actually render it, so you have a picture to upload to your Facebook and show off to your friends. So you want to come on to the output, and we want to change the width and height to whatever you want, but I always like to do maybe 1080p, and make sure the resolution is something high, so at least 72. You could maybe go up to the 301 maybe. The frame rate doesn't really matter because we're not making an animation. The frame range again doesn't really matter because we're just doing a still image. And with all that checked, you want to come up to save, and if you select file and then hit the button and select desktop, and you save this to wherever, so we're just going to call this render, and then hit save, and then that will be rendered to the desktop. And then the format, you can choose whatever. You could have a JPEG, or I always like to work with PNG, portable network graphic. The depth we want to keep at 8-bit channel for now, and with all that checked, all that's left to do to render it out would be hit this middle render button here, and that's going to render it to the picture viewer, and you can see that's going to start rendering and saving the still image. So that pretty much wraps it up for this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it and you learned a lot from it. So don't forget to leave your feedback in the comment section below this video, and also don't forget to rate and share this video. I really appreciate it. So thanks for watching everyone, and I will be back very soon in another video.